In this video, I challenge the conventional history of humanity's most famous monument to prove that Stonehenge is not just a circle of rocks, but a massive, hyper-advanced numerological calculator. But the difficulty is that mainstream archaeology has spent centuries burying the mathematical truth beneath layers of primitive myths. And if I fail to decode this ancient cipher, we risk losing the exact coordinates to a forgotten cosmic frequency forever. Picture the Salisbury Plain, 5,000 years ago, shrouded in the thick, icy mist of a prehistoric dawn. Giant monoliths weighing up to 25 tons each were dragged across impossible terrains. Because of their immense size and the sheer physical brutality required to move them, Orthodox scholars stubbornly tell us this was merely a primitive temple for basic agricultural sun worship. But look much closer. Look at the exact, unbelievable geometry, the staggering precision of the astronomical placements, and the deep mathematical harmony vibrating through the very earth beneath them. Therefore, we must ask a highly dangerous question. What if the builders were not cave-dwelling primitives grunting in the mud, but master numerologists possessing an intellect that easily rivals our modern quantum supercomputers? The emotional weight of this realization is staggering. We have all felt that profound, aching disconnection from our ancestors, that haunting, quiet suspicion that we have forgotten something absolutely vital about our place in the universe. This towering monument is the key to remembering our true lineage. Throughout this intensive journey, we will uncover a specific string of numbers hidden deeply within the massive sarsen stones, a sequence so perfectly aligned with the sacred geometry of the cosmos that it completely defies all logical explanation by standard modern historical standards. Because these specific numbers mirror the exact physical dimensions of the Earth and the orbital cycles of the Moon, we are forced to confront a terrifying and incredibly beautiful truth about human history. But the most shocking revelation of all is a hidden acoustic frequency, a highly specific numeric code permanently locked inside the mysterious Aubrey holes, which we will finally reveal at the very end of this investigation. If you have ever felt deep in your soul that the universe speaks a mathematical language you cannot quite hear, you are not alone. Our common enemy is the rigid academic dogma that constantly tells us our ancient ancestors were ignorant savages. By the time we finish calculating the true ultimate sum of Stonehenge, you will absolutely never look at the ancient world or the profound numbers appearing in your own daily life the same way again. The stones are waiting for us. The ancient calculator is still running. Let us begin the sacred sequence.
The first layer of this massive stone calculator reveals itself not in the giant pillars that dominate the skyline, but in the earth beneath them. Surrounding the main stone circle is a ring of exactly 56 mysterious pits, known as the Aubrey holes. Because there are exactly 56 of these holes, historians have long scratched their heads, trying to force this number into simple agricultural calendars. But 56 is no ordinary number. In the deep traditions of ancient numerology, 56 is a number of monumental transition and cosmic alignment. It is the absolute key to predicting lunar eclipses with terrifying accuracy. Therefore, the builders of Stonehenge were not just marking seasons, they were downloading the exact mechanical movements of the heavens into the soil of the earth itself. Imagine the absolute terror and awe of a society that could predict the exact moment the moon would turn blood red years in advance, simply by moving a mathematical marker from one hole to the next. The vulnerability here is palpable. We rely on modern satellites and supercomputers to understand the sky today, yet these ancient masterminds achieved the exact same astronomical precision using nothing but chalk, earth, and the divine language of numbers. Because they encoded this knowledge so perfectly and permanently, we must assume they desperately wanted it to survive the inevitable cataclysms of time. But the orthodox establishment refuses to acknowledge the highly sophisticated numerology at play, labeling the Aubrey holes as mere sockets for wooden posts that rotted away long ago. Therefore, they completely miss the symphony of mathematics right beneath their feet. When we break down the number 56 numerologically, 5 plus 6 equals 11, the ultimate master number of intuition, spiritual insight, and higher dimensional connection. The entire perimeter of Stonehenge was meticulously designed to act as a giant antenna, vibrating constantly at the master frequency of 11. This profound realization means that people who stood within this sacred circle were not just observing the cosmos, they were mathematically aligning their own consciousness with the universe. As we dig deeper into the Master Builder's numbers, we begin to see a complex pattern that heavily transcends simple astronomy. We are looking at a deliberate, masterful attempt to perfectly mirror the architecture of the divine on Earth. And this brings us to an even more impossible mathematical calculation hidden deep in the inner horseshoe, a calculation involving a constant that supposedly had not even been discovered yet. The plot dramatically thickens as we realize that the ancient Britons somehow possessed the ultimate blueprint of creation itself. The numbers are speaking loud and clear, but we are only just beginning to translate their ancient, thunderous voice.
As we step from the outer rings into the colossal heart of Stonehenge, a completely new number begins to profoundly resonate through the ancient stones. A number that forms the very mathematical foundation of physical reality itself. We are talking about the ultimate cosmic frequency of 432. Because Orthodox historians continuously view Stonehenge through the extremely narrow lens of primitive tools and simple survival, they completely ignore the deep harmonic resonance embedded in its exact measurements. But when we apply highly advanced numerological analysis to the physical distances between the massive Sarsen circle and the inner bluestone horseshoe, a breathtaking pattern immediately emerges. Therefore, we discover with absolute certainty that Stonehenge is mathematically tethered to the cosmic number 432, the exact frequency of natural harmony, the vibration of the universe itself. The radius of the moon is precisely 1,080 miles, and when you multiply that by 400, you get 432,000. Furthermore, the sun's radius is approximately 432,000 miles. Because these massive celestial measurements perfectly align with the geometry of the stones on the ground, we must face an impossible reality. The ancient builders of Stonehenge knew the exact dimensions of the sun and the moon. But how could they possibly know this without modern telescopes or digital technology? This is where the true emotional core of our journey genuinely hits hard. We have been constantly taught to feel superior to our ancestors, to view them as intellectually inferior beings desperately struggling to survive in the cold mud. The truth, however, is that they possessed a profound, intimate connection to the absolute mathematical source code of creation, a beautiful connection we have tragically lost in our modern age of shallow distraction. By flawlessly encoding the 432 frequency into the very architecture of Stonehenge, they built an instrument of massive healing, a physical calculator that didn't just track time, but actually corrected the vibrational imbalances of anyone standing within its center. This monument was a massive tuning fork for the human soul. Therefore, the ancient people who journeyed here were not just blindly attending a primitive ritual,
They were stepping inside a giant mathematical machine specifically designed to realign their biology with the heartbeat of the cosmos. As we calculate the exact angles of the solstices, the numbers keep pointing directly back to this universal harmonic. The stones are singing a song of pure mathematics, but the greatest secret is not just in their placement, but in the actual physical composition of the stones themselves. What happens when you violently strike a monolithic rock that has been perfectly calibrated to a cosmic number? The shocking answer will shatter everything you thought you knew about ancient engineering.
The overwhelming visual majesty of Stonehenge is completely undeniable. But to truly decode its ultimate purpose, we must tightly close our eyes and actively listen to the hidden mathematics of sound. Because the ancient builders did not just select any random rocks from the surrounding grassy fields, they deliberately traveled over 140 treacherous miles to the rugged Preseli Hills in Wales to harvest a very specific, rare type of bluestone. But why undergo such a torturous, back-breaking journey to drag massive stones across lethal mountains and freezing rivers when perfectly good rock was abundantly available nearby? Therefore, we must deeply look beyond the physical realm and delve into the unseen, powerful numerological frequencies of ancient acoustics. These particular Welsh bluestones possess a highly rare magical property. They are actual lithophones. When heavily struck, they ring out with the stunning clarity of a metallic bell. Because these heavy stones literally sing, the entire structure of Stonehenge was designed not just as a visual calendar, but as a colossal, highly interactive musical instrument perfectly calibrated to exact numerological frequencies. Imagine a massive chorus of ancient priests striking these giant tuning forks in absolute perfect synchronicity, generating a massive wave of sound that aggressively resonated across the entire Salisbury Plain. The sheer emotional impact of this overwhelming sound must have been entirely transformative, vibrating directly through the bones and tissues of the worshippers, immediately inducing profound altered states of consciousness. The precise numbers involved in these acoustics are staggering. The exact speed of sound, the specific resonant frequencies of the bluestones, all perfectly align with the sacred geometry mapped out on the dirt ground. But mainstream science repeatedly and lazily dismisses this acoustic genius as a mere coincidence, a lucky byproduct of the stone type. Therefore, we are left to fight a bitter battle against a false narrative that actively strips the deep magic and the brilliant intentional mathematics from our human heritage. When we carefully analyze the specific acoustic tones emitted by the stones, we incredibly find harmonic ratios that perfectly mirror the Pythagorean tuning system thousands of years before the mathematician Pythagoras was even born. The core math of the universe was literally being played as a loud symphony in prehistoric Britain. This undeniable fact means Stonehenge was a massive sonic calculator, constantly computing the frequencies of the earth and the heavens and broadcasting them to the people. The sheer vulnerability of human existence in the brutal ancient world was wonderfully counteracted by this profound acoustic embrace, a loud reminder that they were deeply part of a mathematically ordered universe. Yet, the music of the stones is only one layer of the calculation. As the sound waves rippled outward, they interacted with a celestial dance of shadows and light, leading us directly to an even more complex mathematical equation hidden in the alignment of the heavens. As the powerful resonant frequencies of the bluestones slowly fade into the cold mist, we must violently turn our gaze from the earth to the terrifying, endless beauty of the ancient sky. Because for the master builders of Stonehenge, the sky was definitely not a random canvas of scattered stars, but a flawless, perfectly ticking clock composed of enormous numerological cycles. But predicting the exact movements of this massive celestial clock is incredibly difficult, heavily requiring many generations of meticulous observation and highly complex mathematical recording. Therefore, Stonehenge was painstakingly constructed as a permanent, immovable ledger, a gigantic stone calculator built to exactly compute the dates of the most terrifying events in the ancient world: massive solar and lunar eclipses. At the absolute heart of this complex calculation lies the precise number
18.6. This is the exact length in mathematical years of the lunar nodal cycle, the exact time it takes for the moon's orbital plane to complete a full, terrifying rotation. Because the ancient builders mathematically tracked this incredibly complicated 18.6-year cycle, they could accurately predict the terrifying moments when the warm sun would be completely swallowed by cold darkness. Imagine the immense power and the incredibly heavy emotional burden of the specific individuals who operated this giant calculator. To the uninitiated masses, the sudden disappearance of the sun was a horrific sign of the end of the world, a moment of profound psychological terror and ultimate vulnerability. But to the elite numerologists of Stonehenge, it was simply the perfectly expected sum of a cosmic mathematical equation. By understanding the math, they successfully conquered human fear. Therefore, this monument stands today as one of the absolute earliest known triumphs of human intellect over the terrifying, chaotic forces of raw nature. The station stones, 4 highly specific markers placed in a precise geometric rectangle around the monument, are the ultimate keys to this celestial calculation. The short sides of this brilliant rectangle point perfectly to the midsummer sunrise, while the long sides align absolutely perfectly with the extreme moonrises of the 18.6-year cycle. It is a sacred geometry of such breathtaking sophistication that it immediately makes the orthodox timeline of human intelligence look utterly absurd. We are aggressively facing a common enemy in the modern assumption that ancient minds were simple and dull. The absolute truth is, their minds were arguably much sharper, brilliantly unclouded by the toxic noise of modern life, and highly capable of tracking the decimal points of cosmic movement across many decades. But the ultimate undeniable proof of their genius is not just in the tracking of time, but in the deliberate incorporation of a divine mathematical constant that forms the very building blocks of physical life itself. The calculator was not just tracking the stars, it was tracking the actual footprint of God.
We have perfectly established that Stonehenge is a functioning machine of time and sound. But as we boldly penetrate its innermost sacred sanctum, we immediately encounter the physical fingerprint of creation itself, the legendary golden ratio. Because the numbers we have uncovered so far could theoretically be dismissed by absolute skeptics as mere astronomical necessities, we must fiercely look for a mathematical signature that serves absolutely no purely functional calendar purpose. But when we meticulously measure the exact proportions of the inner horseshoe of trilithons relative to the massive outer Sarsen circle, the ratio of their diameters is incredibly precise. Therefore, we are instantly forced to confront the undeniable, shocking presence of Phi 1.618, the divine golden number that directly dictates the spiral of galaxies, the growth of leaves, and the exact proportions of the human body. The ancient master builders intentionally encoded this divine proportion into the massive stones to explicitly signify that the calculator was intimately connected to organic life. Because Phi is the absolute universal constant of beauty and harmony, walking into Stonehenge was mathematically equivalent to walking into the perfectly balanced center of the universe. This powerful realization strikes at the very core of our deep modern emotional longing. Today, our bustling cities are built on rigid grids and harsh, soulless angles, completely disconnected from the natural mathematics of the earth. We heavily feel this painful disconnection in our daily stress, our depression, and our deep anxiety. But the ancients brilliantly built their most sacred spaces using the exact numerological code of nature itself. Therefore, Stonehenge was a place of supreme spiritual healing, where the chaotic, frantic energy of the human mind was instantly brought into perfect golden proportion. The orthodox academic view completely ignores this, tragically treating the stones as mere dumb blocks in a primitive wall.
But we know much better. We can easily see the massive intelligence violently screaming out from the very geometry. The exact width of the inner horseshoe compared to its length perfectly mimics the golden rectangle. They didn't just accidentally stumble upon this by moving heavy rocks around until it looked nice. They deeply possessed a highly sacred numerology that fully understood the universe as a mathematically generated hologram. And if they deeply knew the golden ratio, what other highly advanced mathematical concepts were they blatantly hiding in plain sight? This is the massive open loop we must constantly circle back to. Every single stone is a crucial digit in an ancient equation that is still waiting to be completely solved. As we deeply marvel at the golden ratio, we must now ask how they actually communicated these massive numbers. Without a written alphabet, how did the builders pass down this deeply complex data? The answer lies in a highly hidden language of measurement.
To truly operate the giant mathematical calculator of Stonehenge, we must deeply learn the hidden mystical language of its creators, a language absolutely not spoken with words, but beautifully articulated through the sacred dimensions of physical space. Because there are absolutely no written texts left behind by the ancient builders, mainstream historians arrogantly assume they were completely illiterate and ignorant. But this incredibly lazy assumption completely blinds us to the profound reality of ancient communication. Therefore, we must immediately introduce the profound concept of megalithic gematria, a complex system where numbers, lengths, and angles were the actual alphabet of a highly advanced scientific priesthood. The absolute key to reading this ancient language is the megalithic yard, a highly precise unit of measurement discovered by engineer Alexander Thom, equal to exactly 2.72 modern feet. Because the entire massive structure of Stonehenge is meticulously laid out in perfect multiples of this exact megalithic yard, we know with absolute certainty that this was not a localized, random measuring system. It was a highly standardized, incredibly accurate numeric language deeply shared across all of prehistoric Europe. When we carefully measure the physical circumference of the massive sarsen circle in megalithic yards, the exact numbers generate a harmonic resonance that corresponds absolutely exactly to the physical circumference of the Earth itself. Imagine the breathtaking, immense ambition of these ancient people. They were literally physically shrinking the entire massive planet down into a stone circle, successfully creating a perfect mathematical microcosm. The intense vulnerability of standing inside this sacred circle is profound. You are essentially standing at the literal command center of a miniature Earth. But the scientific establishment fiercely fights back against the undeniable concept of the megalithic yard, falsely claiming it is a mere statistical illusion. Therefore, they deliberately and cruelly silence the highly intelligent voice of the ancients, violently reducing a beautiful symphony of mathematical poetry to a mere pile of random rocks. By actively recognizing their brilliant numeric language, we instantly restore their dignity and their unmatched genius. The powerful numbers 3, 6, and 9, which the genius Nikola Tesla famously claimed were the absolute keys to the universe, are repeatedly found in the groupings of the massive stones and the precise angles of their alignments. The ancient builders were deliberately writing a colossal message directly into the earth, a message that clearly says, we fully understand the deepest code of reality. But this powerful code was absolutely not just meant to be read locally. The heavy stones of Stonehenge were physically connected to a much larger global mathematical equation. To quickly find the next massive piece of the puzzle, we must heavily zoom out and look at the actual geographic coordinates of the monument. Because the true, terrifying power of this calculator is only revealed when you plug it into the energetic grid of the planet itself. The giant stone calculator of the Salisbury Plain absolutely does not exist in isolation. It is a highly vital node, perfectly plugged directly into the massive energetic motherboard of the Earth itself. Because Stonehenge strategically sits upon a highly powerful intersection of ancient invisible ley lines, its massive numerological power is mathematically amplified millions of times over. But standard modern geography foolishly treats the precise placement of ancient monuments as merely a matter of sheer convenience or simple resource availability. Therefore, we must rigorously look at the exact latitude and longitude of Stonehenge to properly decode the hidden geographic numerology that mainstream science is far too afraid to touch. The precise, undeniable latitude of Stonehenge is exactly 51 degrees, 10 minutes, and 42 seconds north. When you meticulously apply ancient numerological reduction to these exact coordinates, successfully adding the digits together, they perfectly distill down to the absolute master number, 33. Because 33 is universally recognized in highly esoteric traditions as the absolute highest frequency of spiritual mastery and divine illumination, the specific location of this monument is absolutely no accident. The brilliant builders meticulously scanned the entire landscape, likely using a lost advanced technology or highly profound intuitive dowsing, to find the absolute exact coordinate on the planet that powerfully vibrated at the high frequency of 33. The emotional, deeply spiritual revelation here is utterly astounding. It mathematically means our ancestors actively viewed the Earth not as dead dirt and cold rock, but as a living, heavily breathing mathematical entity, densely crisscrossed with massive invisible highways of raw energy. We have tragically lost this deep connection, blindly wandering through our modern concrete lives, completely numb to the massive energetic grids right beneath our feet. But the brilliant builders of Stonehenge actively built their massive calculator right on the Earth's main planetary power supply. Therefore, the heavily calibrated stones were able to powerfully channel this planetary energy, directly routing it toward the heavens during the solstices. This was an active, highly functioning machine. Furthermore, when you explicitly draw lines perfectly connecting Stonehenge to other massive ancient megaliths across the globe, absolutely perfect geometric patterns immediately emerge. Highly complex triangles, hexagons, and massive golden spirals that flawlessly map out a unified global numerological web. We are actively fighting against the deeply ingrained, completely false belief that humanity was heavily disconnected and isolated in the past. The undeniable math completely proves they were a deeply integrated part of a highly unified global understanding of sacred geometry. As we slowly comprehend the massive mind-bending scale of this planetary calculator, a highly dark and deeply troubling question arises. If this lost technology was so mathematically perfect and this knowledge so profound, why was it violently forgotten? The answer lies in a highly deliberate suppression of truth.
As we rapidly approach the final massive equation of the giant calculator, we must bravely confront the highly uncomfortable and deeply infuriating truth about exactly why this immense numerological knowledge was brutally stolen from humanity. Because the absolute, undeniable mathematical precision of Stonehenge heavily threatens the established fragile timeline of human evolution, orthodox academia has systematically worked to brutally suppress, marginalize, and openly mock the highly accurate mathematical realities we have explored today. But stubbornly ignoring the massive numbers does absolutely not magically disappear. It only brilliantly exposes the immense fragility and fear of the massive mainstream narrative. Therefore, we must strongly act as the bold defenders of this ancient wisdom, aggressively rescuing the sacred mathematics from the dusty, highly unimaginative archives of conventional archaeology. Deeply think about the countless brilliant independent researchers who have been cruelly ridiculed for successfully pointing out the obvious alignments, the exact geometric ratios, and the immense cosmic frequencies heavily embedded in the stones. The deep emotional toll of this massive suppression is incredibly heavy. It absolutely represents a cruel theft of our highly collective human heritage. We are constantly told we are the absolute apex of intelligence, yet we desperately struggle to easily replicate the highly advanced acoustic, geometric, and astronomical perfection achieved by people wearing simple animal skins over 5 millennia ago. Because the rigid establishment cannot easily explain how the builders deeply knew the exact measurements of the Earth, the Moon, and the exact golden ratio, they simply and lazily dismiss it as pareidolia, the human tendency to see random patterns in useless data. But the hard, cold statistics completely destroy this pathetic argument. The mathematical odds of all these exact numerological constants flawlessly converging in one single stone circle by pure blind chance are literally billions to one. Therefore, the angry denial of Stonehenge's obvious mathematical genius is completely not science. It is a highly willful blindness to the divine, absolute order of the universe. This willful, stubborn blindness is our absolute common enemy. It intentionally keeps humanity totally disconnected from the highly profound, deeply mystical numerology that heavily governs our reality. By deeply understanding that Stonehenge was a hyper-advanced, flawless calculator, we are actively taking back our massive power. We are successfully remembering that we directly come from a lineage of absolute genius, a brilliant lineage that deeply understood how to harmoniously unite the human soul with the massive rotation of the galaxies. But our incredible journey is definitely not quite complete. We have successfully decoded the acoustics, the celestial alignments, the sacred gematria, and the massive planetary coordinates. Now it is time to fully close the ultimate open loop. It is time to run the final calculation.
We have successfully arrived at the absolute epicenter of the ancient world's greatest mathematical machine, and it is finally time to run the highly anticipated, earth-shattering final calculation. In the beginning, we fiercely challenged the orthodox, highly primitive history of Stonehenge, boldly promising to strongly prove it was a highly complex celestial calculator. And we successfully opened a massive loop about a heavily hidden frequency locked deeply inside the geometry of the stones. Because we have painstakingly decoded the 56 Aubrey holes, the massive 432 cosmic frequency, the divine golden ratio of 1.618, and the ultimate master latitude of 33, we now absolutely hold all the required variables needed to accurately solve the grand equation. But exactly how do all these disparate massive numbers perfectly unify into a highly single cohesive message from the brilliant ancient master builders? Therefore, we must highly analyze the absolute sum total of the monument's original massive stone count. When the massive structure was originally complete, there were precisely 30 gigantic sarsen stones highly erect in the outer circle, perfectly multiplied by the 30 massive lintels that flawlessly sat upon them, beautifully creating a perfect geometric continuous mathematical loop. When we take the foundational absolutely core numbers of Stonehenge and correctly multiply them directly through the ancient proven systems of megalithic gematria, we immediately arrive at the undeniable speed of light. Yes, the exact highly precise speed of light, miraculously calculated in ancient miles, is permanently encoded into the exact physical dimensions of the sarsen circle. Because the brilliant ancient builders deeply understood the ultimate absolute constant of the physical universe, light itself, they actively built a massive machine specifically designed to capture, heavily calculate, and perfectly reflect that divine light back to the heavens. The profound, overwhelming emotional realization is that Stonehenge is absolutely not a tomb, and it is completely not a primitive ruin. It is an eternal, highly polished mathematical mirror flawlessly reflecting the ultimate brilliance of the ancient human mind. We entirely no longer have to deeply feel small or totally lost in an uncaring cold universe because our brilliant ancestors lovingly left us a highly permanent massive stone reminder that we are intrinsically, perfectly, mathematically woven directly into the very fabric of creation. We successfully fought against the toxic dogma of primitive history, and the massive numbers have utterly set us free. Therefore, the giant massive calculator of stone is still functioning perfectly today,
absolutely not processing raw data on a digital screen, but flawlessly processing the massive cosmic cycles of time, powerful light, and divine energy for anyone willing to deeply learn its ancient language. The tragic consequences of highly failing to adequately decode this would have been the absolute permanent loss of our cosmic identity, but we have successfully solved the highly complex cipher. To deeply explore the hidden numerological codes strictly in your own daily life and successfully unlock the highly powerful math of your own eternal soul, simply visit the link in the deep description below to quickly get your free profound numerology reading absolutely today. The entire universe is constantly speaking to you strictly in numbers. It is finally time to listen.